Welcome to this evening session. We all know that the first week of August is Breastfeeding Week. It's celebrated worldwide. But as a group, I think everyone needs to be, we all believe that everyone needs to be committed to breastfeeding all the time. The Breastfeeding Week, as is true of any of these days of celebration, are just, opportunities to focus and bring attention to important aspects of whatever it is, whether we are celebrating a condition or we are celebrating an event. That's only to highlight and focus everybody's attention. But every new mother knows that breastfeeding is a journey. It's a journey that is sometimes easy, sometimes a little tumultuous, sometimes challenging, but it is a journey which is ultimately satisfying and extremely beneficial. So the way we'll do this panel is we will, each one of us, do a short presentation, after which we will open up for a Q&A where all of you can type and ask your questions and they will be answered. Before we actually begin, I would like to just do some quick polls to get to understand a little bit about the group that we are talking to. So I'd like all of you to answer this poll.
You could have added for dads.
For dads, that's true. I didn't ask. So that's true. We can ask a show of hands if there are dads in the audience. I don't think I'm seeing any names, but there are a few more left to vote, I think.
Yeah, we are done 100%.
No, 70%.
Yeah, about 75% have voted. Okay, so
rest is us.
Okay, great. So about 75% have voted. So about 50% are new mums, 30% are expecting mothers, and 20% are experienced in breastfeeding moms. Excellent. So I will allow panelists to vote as well and launch the next poll to understand who do you believe is or was or will be your strongest support for breastfeeding. Now, can all of you see my screen? Screen is visible, yeah? Okay. So as I said, this whole session is focused on the theme of this year, which is supporting breastfeeding for a healthier planet. And I am Uma Ram. I am a consultant gynecologist, obstetrician at Sitapati Clinic. I'm going to set the ball rolling by talking about the impact and the importance of breastfeeding from the mother's perspective. We always think of breastfeeding as important for the baby, and it is very important for the baby. But we need to also understand the benefits of breastfeeding for the mom. And the reason we have a group of people to do this session is because actually the support of breastfeeding depends on various people fitting in little bits of information and little bits of help to ensure that the exercise of breastfeeding and the experience of breastfeeding happens smoothly and is helpful and ends up being a pleasant journey. So we need a cohesive support system. The first thing I want to talk about is nutrition and lactation, because there are a lot of myths here. Actually, there is very good evidence that the mother's capacity to produce milk, how good the milk is or how much the milk is, so both the quantity and the quality, is actually fairly resilient and remarkably resistant to what the mother eats. So contrary to what we normally believe, we don't have to dramatically change what we are eating to ensure that the baby is getting enough nutrition. So unless somebody is significantly nutritionally deprived, it doesn't affect the quantity of milk that you're going to produce. And in contrast is this other statement that says that breastfeeding will affect the mother's nutritional status, because what the mother has, be it iron, be it calcium, can go into the breast milk to supply the baby. So there are certain needs that the mother needs to compensate to ensure that she doesn't go into nutritional deficiency. And at the same time, you don't need to eat too much in order to ensure that your baby is getting enough milk. So, and this is particularly important when we will discuss in the course of the Q&A and discussion about what it is that a mother should eat in the postnatal period. You don't need to have a huge amount of calories going in. You don't need dynamite laddus to go in. You don't need food that is completely depletion of all paripu and protein, which is the only source of protein for vegetarians. And you need to eat sensibly. Now, moving on to the impact on the mother, the first, as a direct correlation of what I said about that it is not necessary to eat too much more. If you just ensure that you're only having about 300 to 350 or maximum 400 calories additional to your regular food, you will actually lose weight when you're breastfeeding. The reason women gain weight when they're breastfeeding is because they're eating a far more quantity than is actually needed to meet that additional calorie need that breastfeeding will result. And therefore, as I said, nutritional status is something that we need to pay a little attention to. Because when you lactate, when the baby suckles at the breast, a hormone called oxytocin is produced. It reduces the amount of blood or bleeding that happens in the immediate postpartum period. Now, prolonged breastfeeding, when you continue to breastfeed, it has certain more important long-term impacts which women don't pause to think about. The first is that it reduces the risk of cancer. It reduces the risk of both ovarian cancer and breast cancer, and to some extent cancer of the lining of the womb or the endometrial cancer. And these are significant benefits to the mother. It significantly improves cardiovascular wellness and reduces cardiovascular risk. And it also reduces the risk of diabetes. So it is extremely important for mothers, especially mothers who have gestational diabetes, to focus on exclusive breastfeeding, because there is good scientific data that breastfeeding can reduce the risk of diabetes in the future. This apart, of course, there is economic benefit and social benefit to breastfeeding. So, and the last point I want to touch upon is about contraception and breastfeeding. Both, there are a lot of myths and more myths than facts in people's minds. The first myth is that you cannot get pregnant as long as you're breastfeeding. Now, when you're exclusively breastfeeding, yes, it will suppress ovulation, but this does not continue foolproof beyond the first 4 or 5 months. So once you start supplementing some food, and even if, because you won't be exclusively breastfeeding after a period of 5 or 6 months, even if you're continuing to breastfeed, there can be ovulation. And because you're not ovulating on time, the period will be erratic. And therefore, there are a lot of women who conceive during lactational period without actually having a menstrual cycle or a period. So there is an important need for contraception even if you're exclusively breastfeeding after the first 4 to 5 months. And the second thing is that it is actually not safe to use certain contraceptives when you're breastfeeding. That also is not true. The low dose pill, the intrauterine devices, all of these are quite safe to use when you're breastfeeding. The only thing that we would avoid is a traditional, what we call combined pill, which has estrogen and progesterone for the first 6 months after you deliver, because it can increase the risk of blood clotting in your legs or brain. And for that reason, for the first 6 months, if we need to use a contraception, we use something that is only based on progesterone. So it is safe to use contraception when you're feeding, and feeding alone does not exclusively protect you from getting pregnant again. And that would be the least likely time that you want to have another baby, and therefore it's important to think about contraception. So with those few words, I will stop and move on to the recipient of this exclusive privilege of having the liquid gold or breast milk, and introduce Rekha Sudarshan to do her bit. Rekha is very passionate about supporting women through pregnancy and childbirth. She is a childbirth educator and a lactation consultant who is part of our team at Sitapati. Rekha?
Thank you, Dr. Uma. So I belong to that niche crowd of that 18% from the poll, a lactation consultant. So I'm both liked and disliked. Liked by all the pregnant women because we promote, we give them all the benefits of breastfeeding. Disliked by the new mothers because I'm one of those reminders who come into the room and remind them about breastfeeding. But so I mean, I come across all kinds of mothers, but it's very interesting to see that every mother comes in with a good intent to breastfeed, but what we have found over so many years of working with this interesting group is 9 on 10 pregnant women, as they come in for labor, they come in with on one side they have a bag which has clothes for them, clothes for the to be born baby. On the other side, they already have a bag which might have a formula tin, which might have the best bottle in the world. There's nothing like that, and a breast pump too. So in your mind, if you've already decided to give the baby something other than breast milk, it's an Herculean task for us to prepare you for breastfeeding. So we do talk to you before you deliver. So we do handhold you later on, okay? So one thing that I want all that new moms or the ones who are, going to be new moms very soon to understand that is breast milk is the best milk, no alternative for it. In simple terms, you go searching for organic vegetables and organic fruits. I don't think anything is more organic than breast milk. The best unadulterated natural food is breast milk. So if we can just understand the definitions of infant feeding, I think it makes it very easier for a mom to understand that there's actually a lot of difference between the thing. So WHO recommends 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding. Yes, WHO recommends 2 years of breastfeeding. We are very nice to you. We say at least 1 year breastfeed, but in that 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding. But we have found that the minute we say 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding, at least 8 on 10 new moms will ask, can I just give some water, little water? I think the baby is thirsty. So we always ask them, did the baby complain to you? So just for your information and just for your academic knowledge, breast milk has 87% water. So you as a new mom drink water, but don't give the baby water. Because in many societies, a new mother is deprived of water. Water is rationed because they believe that if the new mother has water, the breast milk will become watery. Okay, so there's nothing like that. So you drink water, you don't give the baby water. 6 months of exclusive breastfeeding. That's what we promote. Yes, predominant breastfeeding is we try different kinds of things and then we realize that the mother is just not producing as much milk as she has to produce. The pediatrician, me as a team, yes, we do decide that under hospital supervision, you can give the baby. The first thing we do is express. We ask you to express your breast milk with a breast pump. And then we ask you to feed, not with a bottle, either with a palader, spoon or a cup. Sometimes if it really doesn't suffice, then yes, we do recommend some formula, but as respite, as top feed. But the bottle is here just to tell you we don't promote bottles. So that's the thing. And then, yes, timely complementary feeding is very important. Oh, I have over enthusiastic mothers who say, why should I stop my exclusive breastfeeding in 6 months? We're not asking you to stop your exclusive breastfeeding. We're only saying complement, just give that timely complementary feeding because babies need that kind of a nutrition. Breast milk can provide only so much for 6 months, but milk will be breast milk for 1 full year with necessary for complementary feeding. So these are the different kinds of infant feeding that we talk about. Can I have the next slide? Yeah, thanks. So this is one thing that we definitely want all new moms and pregnant women who are about to deliver to understand that position, posture, and latch are very, very important. Please remember, breastfeeding is a painless experience. If a mom experiences pain, the first thing she has to see is the baby latching on well? Okay, so this is something we do teach. Yes, it's a baby-led feeding and all that, but see, almost all new mothers would love to sit and feed, but they're unable to feed. So if you have a normal vaginal birth, we do lie down and we do let you lie down and feed for the first 1 or 2 feeds. And then we help you to sit and feed. If you have a cesarean, yes, 3 or 4 feeds, and then we help you to, probably incline your bed, start sitting and feeding. But all this my new mothers do, but almost all new mothers sit like queens. They have a pillow on the back, pillow on the lap, and off late I find a neck pillow so that you can just doze off. There are bolsters on the side. But the biggest mistake they do is they have the baby and turn only the baby's face and feed. So this is like having a glass of water and I'm asked to drink water like this towards the side. Twice, thrice, third time, I'm going to pull the glass towards me or push the glass. Okay. You sit and feed, you stand and feed. We don't recommend lying down and feeding, but please remember these 4 things. Number 1, ear, baby's ear, shoulder and hip is always in one straight line. So how does it happen? Only when the baby's tummy is towards the mother's tummy. Please be reminded that only a formula-fed baby, a bottle-fed baby faces the ceiling. A breastfed baby always faces the mother. And the baby always comes to the breast. The breast never goes to the baby. Recently, when I went on rounds, one of those days, and I found a mother feeding like this, bending down and feeding. And I asked her, why are you bending down so much? She said, the baby has back pain. So I asked her, did the baby complain to you? Okay, so please don't assume baby comes to the breast. And the most important thing is the areola, the dark area around the nipple goes inside the baby's mouth. So what we do in Sitapati is right from the first feed, we help you make a teat of the breast and put it inside the baby's mouth. So when you as a new mother bend down and see, you'll see the baby's mouth like an alphabet O, like a fish. So it's literally like the upper lip here, the lower lip here, if you assume this is the breast, and only the tongue touches the breast. Now only the tongue touches the nipple. So this is something that we do teach. So these are positions we teach you, but eventually the mother and the baby fall into one position, which might not pass my certified eye, but is breastfeeding happening? Is the mother happy? Is it a painless experience is what we see. But these are things it's worth remembering and worth following, okay? So the next thing the interesting thing that we definitely want you to know is or a lactating mother. It's not that you schedule a time for exercise or you use it as an excuse saying that I'm a lactating mother and I don't have time to exercise. But these are some simple exercises that you can do as a part of your breastfeeding routine. For example, every 2 to 3 hours, you're going to feed your baby. And almost all new moms hand over the newborn, especially in the first 1 or 2 months, they hand over the new mom to the new baby to a primary caregiver to help the baby burp. So I'm just saying, take 10 minutes off that, off that time. To just work on your back, work on your shoulder. Very simple exercise, just stretch your hand, flex your fingers towards your face, or, stretch it the other way. Just do some, reverse plank or do some, and just lift your hand, rotate your hand, do some Bhujangasana. So all this, one will make you feel good. The second most important thing is it's going to help you go through this breastfeeding process. Because we found that over a period of time, we found that it's not the pain of breastfeeding, it's the pain that the other parts of the body go through, that the mother dreads to sit in the breastfeeding position and feed. So she's always looking for some kind of an excuse to get out of breastfeeding. And these are the different things that can play a big role. So we would want you to do this, and please do go for your walk. Exercises helps because it helps in the release of the endorphin hormone, the feel-good hormone, and that's exactly what a new mom wants, okay? And of course, if there are any primary caregivers watching this program, I'm hoping that spouse or the mother-in-law, please give the new mom a good hand. Breastfeeding is not just between the mother and the baby. Breastfeeding is a family thing, because every time the baby cries, most of the times what the mother hears is, you don't have enough milk, the baby has not got enough milk. And for everything, breastfeeding is a solution for everybody at that point of time. Baby has not passed urine, feed the baby. Baby has passed too much urine, feed the baby. Baby is not sleeping, feed and make him sleep. Baby has been sleeping for a very long time, wake him and feed. So that's the only thing the mother keeps hearing. And at one point she says, do I look like a milk making machine? Do I look like a cow? So these are things that come up on and off, okay? So I'm only saying, as a family, support her. As a family, help her. Then the social and the cultural beliefs, please do understand that you might be following it, but it's very important that you have to understand, is it compliant to the breastfeeding process here? And I'm so happy that in the poll, the spouse came out, when I think it was more than 50% there. The father's attitude is very important, very important. You are there. And we're very happy to say that off late, it's not just they say, my wife is pregnant, they say, we are pregnant. So it really helps because we can just see that that support travels through and also helps them through the lactating process. And very important point here is the new mother's history of breastfeeding plays a big role here. Oh, I didn't feed you, you're perfectly fine. And I don't think I don't know why you should feed her and go through the whole process. Or things like, you're anyway going to go back to work after 6 months. I'm going to look after the baby after that. I can't do all this express breast milk through Palader, start the formula off. So the mother's history of breastfeeding plays a role, and peer group. And again, I'm very happy the friends didn't feature there at all. Friends can be of great help, but you have to be very careful about the peer group who are helpful to you and not the ones who tell you not to breastfeed. So my only request here as a panelist is support, sustain, and promote breastfeeding. And again, I repeat, breast milk is the best milk. I don't think any alternative for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Rekha. I think that was a very important presentation, and I can't emphasize more the need to exercise actually even from before pregnancy, before delivery, because we are definitely not used to carrying 3, 4, 5 kilos constantly in our hands and walking. And it's very easy to blame an epidural or labor process for back pain when actually we need to work on our back muscles and get that strength as well. So moving on, I invite Dr. Sharda, our pediatrician and neonatologist, who will talk about the perspective of the baby's doctor and the importance of breastfeeding in these for these little ones. Sharda.
Hi, good evening, one and all. I'm very happy to be part of this session this evening. As we all know, breastfeeding is a time-tested, age-old practice that has existed since mankind has. So I was a bit astonished when I read recently one of the articles in WHO that only 41% of the mothers were actually exclusively breastfeeding their babies. That means the majority are not. And that is quite a surprising fact. And that is why I guess sessions like this are being constantly held to reiterate to the millennial moms, to the new gen moms about the importance and significance of breastfeeding. As a neonatologist, my job is made a tad easier because my obstetric colleague, Dr. Umaram and Rekha Sudarshan, they extensively counsel the mothers during the antenatal visits, and they explain the pros and cons and the benefits and all of that knowledge. They equip the mother with all the knowledge that is required in the antenatal period itself. So my job is pretty much to enforce that knowledge is put into action. So the theory part is over and the practical part of the exam starts. And this is what I find is a tough challenge to a lot of the mothers. They have all the theory, they're high flyers, well-read, they know A to Z, but when it comes to enacting, a lot of them are disappointed and default. So our way of ensuring that the breastfeeding is a success is to first start off with the golden hour. So what is the golden hour? The first hour after birth, when the mother maintains skin-to-skin contact with the baby, is described as the golden hour. And this is an integral part of her breastfeeding journey. So we do this, we try to keep this time as uninterrupted and as undisturbed as possible. In fact, we educate our nurses to keep the logistics such as cleaning the baby, taking the weight, etc., to bare minimum time to enable this mother to have a mom and baby time. And this helps the bonding between the mother and the baby, and that helps in the initiation, the letdown reflex, which initiates breastfeeding. Now, there are benefits to the baby as well. The baby, there is a decrease in the newborn stress. The baby's temperature is regulated. It kickstarts the baby's immunity. So there are lots of benefits to the baby and the mother, and it's a win-win scenario. So now hospital in the labor suite, it's very easy. So we try to put these babies to the mother's chest as soon as they're delivered. And we aim and try to encourage the same in the operating theater after the cesarean section as well. There is an interesting fact that we observe. If you actually put the baby on the mother's breast, they automatically crawl to the nipple and latch. That is called the breast crawl. So it's a very natural process. It's not rocket science. So why are we going against nature? So we'll discuss the reasons for why that is happening so often. Right. So having initiated the feeds, the next phase is the continuation phase or the maintenance phase. It's easy to reach the top. To stay there is hard. We all know that. So what we capitalize on the first 3 to 4 days that the mother spends in the hospital to iron out all these issues. So what are the constant problems that we face for the mother to default or shy away from breastfeeding? First and foremost, she's exhausted after the delivery. She has barely slept. This baby is constantly crying, and all she hears from her mother and aunt and neighbor is that pal porale, pal patale. No milk, milk is not enough. And that's the last straw on the camel's back. And something breaks. So that is when we chip in. And as a team, we are crusaders of breastfeeding in Sitapati. So we all sing the same song. And that's when we reiterate to the mother the significance and importance of breastfeeding. It reduces the intestinal and respiratory infections. It reduces asthma and allergy in the babies. It improves neurodevelopmental outcome. So we keep reiterating this information to the mother, and then she gets another boost and another push. Now, there are other little deterrents that make her wander away. One of the other common reasons is nipple soreness. As Rekha explained, a good latching technique should avoid that in the first place. But even if that happens, there are solutions. They can use the Nip Care cream, they can use nipple shields, and so that is the answer rather than resorting to other modalities. And the other thing is, if the mother is very exhausted, we can express the milk and give her a respite. So the attenders, we constantly tell the attenders to give a positive affirmation to the mother, to move away from negative feedback. And if they want to help at all, they can do this. They can express the milk and then offer that to the mother rather than resorting to formula or bottle feeds. Formula feed is a no-no in our hospital. Bottle feeding is a forbidden word, and that is used only on a prescription basis, literally like a medicine. So we tell the mothers because it's clearly not the best. So that is what I wanted to reiterate, to move away from formula to use breastfeeding as the first and the best method of feeding for your baby, because it's going to give your baby a rock solid foundation. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharda. Thank you very much for that. And I'm sure there will be more questions that we will take during the Q&A. I now move on and invite Janani Lakshminarayanan to talk and give her experience and share her experience. I think we all believe, and it is very true, that it's important for mothers to hear about the experience of other mothers. And while as medical professional, whether we are doctors or pediatricians or lactation consultants, we give you information and we guide and we help. Ultimately, how a mother copes with the situation, how does she handle the different challenges, is something that is very important to, for people to know. And that's the reason why we have two of them on this panel to share their experience with you and actually participate also in the Q&A. So Janani has been a very strong proponent of breastfeeding, and I'm quite interested in listening to what she has to say. Janani.
Thank you, Dr. Uma. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to talk here as a mother and as an advocate of breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is an amazing and gratifying journey, to say the least. And it has its ups and downs like any other journey in life. Beyond the wonderful implications, let me just share some of my learnings from my perspective as a breastfeeding mother. The first learning for me, and one of the most important, is to be informed. While popular opinion says that it's good to be ignorant because it's bliss, and lesser known the better, that way you're not bombarded with too much of information. But what is too much of information? For me, the main part was that being informed helped me identify which of the guidance is worth my while among a zillion sources today. Superstitious, cultural, traditional, and anecdotal evidence, they were all not all pervasive. In fact, a lot of them were not recommended at all, and they were also detrimental to my health as a mother, breastfeeding mother, and it was also detrimental for my baby. Sometimes one of the most casual questions that we hear as a breastfeeding mom is your supply enough? Has the breastfeeding journey been established? When I was a breastfeeding mother, my child, when my child began to cry, my clothes would become wet. And things like this, and also this about why is your milk looking so watery? You've been pumping for 20 minutes and it looks so watery. These kind of questions, they trigger so much of doubt in your mind. And if you were informed with proper, adequate information from professional sources, then I don't think any of these questions would actually have an impact on you, on your thinking, or on your breastfeeding journey. The free advice that comes, there's so much of it, and this being informed also helps you to filter it out. Like Mrs. Rekha said, this drinking water for a baby that's hiccuping, like giving water, all these things you don't have to follow. You know that it's detrimental to the baby's health. While I'm not against elders' advice completely, however well-meaning it is, I would just urge every mother to counter-verify it with a subject matter expert. That way, you will be able to identify contradictions, and definitely an expert's advice completely overrides any other source. I would also say that it's very important to take care of your breasts from the start of pregnancy, well into breastfeeding, because from the start of pregnancy itself, you will need to probably take care of your nipples. You are going to gear yourself for a journey that you have no idea what it's going to be like. Applying nip care cream, applying breast milk itself in case of sores at a later stage. All these things were important in my breastfeeding journey. Beyond that is the most important question that I find others being opposed with. That's the to be. I will just say that there are certain pointers that I would like to share. For not every child, every cry from a child is that of hunger. A child cries for so many reasons, wanting to be carried, feeling cold or hot, or so many reasons. It doesn't have to, or peeing and pooping, everything. The only form of communication that the child knows at that point is to cry. Then the next thing is to check your latch. It's very important to get professional evaluation of your latch so as to ensure a smooth breastfeeding journey. And like the doctor said, as well as Mrs. Rekha, I would say that breastfeed as often as possible and as soon as possible after childbirth for a smooth journey hereafter. And it's also important to maintain your milk supply by also when you're not breastfeeding, it's important to empty your breast of milk by pumping or any other method like hand express it or however. Also, hydrate yourself very well. This is something that is so underrated, but it's so important. And like Dr. Uma said, in my journey, I did not follow any of the cultural and traditional practices postpartum. My diet was a very normal diet. I ate in moderation, and I ate everything, all kinds of cuisines and everything in moderation, a wholesome, nourishing diet. And that took care of my health while I was able to also smoothly breastfeed my baby. And another of my experiences that I'd like to share here is breastfeeding in public. While you can see in this picture, I'm standing in Central Station breastfeeding my child, and not a soul was interested in what I was doing. That is how my experience breastfeeding in public was largely like. I never had any issues, even in India or elsewhere where I traveled, the mode of transport that I used, I never had any issues breastfeeding in public. And I would just say that it was so liberating. I did not have to plan my outings with respect to my baby's feeding time. I did not have to worry about what I need to do in case the baby is hungry when I'm going out, when I'm with the baby outside as well. And these things took, I'll just say it was just liberating. And there are so many methods that probably like we'll discuss later on in this discussion. And I'll also say it is important to normalize breastfeeding inside your house itself to begin with. This is so, you can see in this picture, I'm breastfeeding my boy. He's a newborn here. And behind me is my daughter who's breastfeeding her child. She's pretend feeding her child. That's how normal breastfeeding is in our household. What is important about sibling or other people that you have to fret about covering yourself? That's each one's preference. But what comes out of this is my children never turn and look at a breastfeeding mother to stare, because it's as normal for them as people walking on the road or having their food at a restaurant. That is so important considering the situation that our country is in right now. So we need to normalize these things for a better future for our own children. Beyond this, I think I just have a few pointers. Like I said, the best part of breastfeeding in public was it's on demand. You can just feed your baby anywhere, anytime. In this picture, you can see me sitting by a river and just nourishing my child while enjoying the scenery around. This is an amazing experience. I'll just say that for a new mother, some things that you need to remember are, you just try and get some baby free time in a day. This will ensure that your mind is off a little bit of your stress. You're able to catch up on whatever is happening around you. You are not all the time thinking about the baby and about the baby's needs, and you put yourself also equally important. And second, establishing a support system around you. This is very important for your own mental health. The easiest way to do this would be to take your, people who are giving you that care to your professionals and get them educated on what it's like to care for a pregnant or a breastfeeding mother. It's also nice to, in my experience, I used to breastfeed with other breastfeeding mothers. Like we used to breastfeed our children together. This was fun to say the least. We also had a lot of discussions, but like I said, if you're informed, then there is no question of feeding together disturbing your breastfeeding journey. And last thing that I'd probably say is get rid of the guilt. We are all doing the best that we can to take care of our children, and our children will love us no matter what. There's no replacement for us being the mother to our child. So beyond that, there's no reason for you to feel guilty, however your breastfeeding journey is established. And I'll just say that it's been a wonderful ride because of being informed. Be confident, trust your instincts, mute all the noise, and just do your homework. Then you'll remember that there are professionally qualified, trained, and experienced people to guide you when you're in doubt. Find somebody in your neighborhood that you can trust and have access to, and get your doubts clarified. Good luck in your breastfeeding journey. Thank you, Dr. Uma, and thank you to all the
Thank you very much.
panelists
I think
and to Sitapati Hospital for this wonderful opportunity.
thank you very much. I think that was, there were a lot of points there that were very valuable and important for mothers to take home. I'll just let everybody kind of take in the first few talks that you have heard. And before we move on, I just want you all to answer a few more polls to know how long did you exclusively breastfeed your baby, or for those of you who are the expecting mums, how long do you want to exclusively breastfeed your baby? Okay, so about 50% want to breastfeed or have breastfed for more than 6 months, and another 40% say 6 months. That's good. And we'll move on to poll 4. For those of you who have breastfed, what was the challenge to continuing exclusive breastfeeding? Was it that the milk reduced, or did you need to return to work, or were you advised formula or top feed by a medical professional or your family? Because many times we find return to work is stated as a reason why exclusive breastfeed is difficult to continue. Of course, now, you know, maternity leave you can have for an extended period of time. So, okay. All right. Okay, so one of the things that is very true about all of us, and it is said actually of many things in life, that a lot of things, how we deal with the situation, a lot of it depends on our expectation and what is the expectation that we have set for ourselves. And this we find very true, particularly about birth, because many people have certain expectation of a birth process, and sometimes that birth process does not turn out in the way we have envisaged it. We may have thought that we will have this, you know, really sweet 3.5 kilo baby that will just slip out beautifully in a short labor without any pain relief, everything being natural. And then we may actually develop high blood pressure in pregnancy and end up having a cesarean section and have a tiny 1.2 kilo baby that goes into the NICU, right? There may be some complication because of which, even if there is a term baby, the baby ends up needing some additional care. And there are situations where what Sharda said is may not be possible. Ideally, yes, we would like to have this baby go to the breast, and that's what we aim to do within that half an hour if it is a normal birth, and we try and do it within an hour if it is a section, so the baby is brought back and put to the breast. But sometimes the baby gets whisked away into an neonatal environment where the mother is separated, and what happens about breastfeeding in those situations. To address this, I invite Dr. Lakshmi, a neonatologist, part of the team, who handles these really sick babies and ends up having to counsel these moms and sometimes the family on what needs to be done in these situations. So Lakshmi, I'd like you to take it from here.
Thank you, Uma. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So sometimes we feel so bad to whisk the baby away, and many a times when the baby is very sick or small, we even forget to show the baby to the mother. And after that, we hear from the attenders or the husband that the mother didn't even have a look at the baby. But now, thanks to all our digital development, so we were able to show the videos or the photos of the baby to reassure the mother. Because separating the mother and the baby may be sometimes in the same hospital, or sometimes the baby may have to be shifted to a different hospital, is going to have a huge psychological impact on our breastfeeding. We have to understand that, and we have to be prepared to support that. Most of the time, the mother is also sick, like she's a high-risk pregnancy with a lot of complications. Nowadays, 45 to 50 years old mothers are able to deliver through their infertility management. So most of them are not very vigorous and proactive to jump and breastfeed. So the mother's medical condition also closely related to the baby's problem. So when the mother's medical condition is not very good, they are not in a way to breastfeed. And sometimes, yes, as Uma told, very small preterm babies who are 1.2 to 1.5 kilos, and all these babies who are having problems in their, some problems needing surgery, some of them having breathing issues, some of them didn't cry. So all these babies are taken away from the mother and brought to our NICU. And but still we have to sustain breastfeeding as and when the baby is ready. So how do we do that? There is something called as colostrum swabbing. As we transport the baby, we give a container to the mother. Start pumping your breast as early as possible and start extracting what little milk we have. This colostrum is a very glassy thing, highly immune. Even if the baby is not ready to take a feed, you know, a baby taking a feed is the most strenuous exercise he is doing. So his general condition is respiratory or breathing, and other conditions should be stable enough for him to do it. Time and again, a preterm baby takes 8 months to start their mouth feeding, 8.5 months to start sucking. So till then, you can't keep them devoid of breastfeeding. So we encourage these mothers to start pumping their milk as early as possible. This motivates them psychologically, whether it's being fed or not. They think they are already involved in the baby care. That means a baby cannot be very sick, and they are happy to play a role where they are going to have a major impact on the baby's feeding. So the study which they did, colostrum swabbing, they just apply it in the oral cavity to prevent infection or outcome. But one good thing they found is these mothers were able to express milk for a longer time, and they were able to produce more milk. So we encourage the mothers to start pumping and start sending the milk, and how much ever we get it, we start feeding these babies so that they also play a part in this. So most of the thing is that stress level is very high because of separation, because of their medical condition. The fear, will my baby come back to me? Will my baby come back to me normally? And what is the financial support we are going to give? All this has got a huge impact on these mothers. So that's why we encourage these mothers to pump early. Whenever time permits, to come to the NICU, just hold the baby, touch the baby, Be with the baby. You have to offer them a lot of support. It's just not go. Somebody should hold their hands, sit with them, make them talk, be a good listener. Why are you feeling low? How can we encourage? And we also tell them other tips. Whenever you're pumping, you think about your baby. Your baby is going to come soon. You listen to your favorite music. Trials have shown their favorite music improves their breast pumping and improves the milk output. So we have to give them lot of push from our side, encouragement, smiling, no stern faces. If we show stern faces, their milk output will come. We have to go with a big smile. Sometimes the baby will be very sick. I'll catch hold of one small positive point and go there and tell it to them with a beaming way. Sometimes inside me, I'll be thinking, I hope this baby does well. I'm giving them lot of positive hopes, but that's how we have to take it forward. No point in giving them all the negative thing. A stressed mother, a sick mother, a separated mother, and the baby is sick, financial constraint. All this we have to slowly hold with them, sit with them, talk with them. So this is when a very beautiful new concept have come. 2 new concepts have been introduced in the NICU to improve the breastfeeding. One is a kangaroo mother care. We encourage the mothers to put the baby like a kangaroo without any dress. The baby will go on their bare body and they wrap themselves with an apron or a sari pallu. They sit for 1 to 2 hours. We give them a comfortable chair, play whatever music you want, just enjoy with your baby. Sometimes even when a baby is on mild respiratory support, when a baby is on oxygen, we allow them to do kangaroo care. Very beautiful impact it has on breastfeeding. It relieves their stress and it gives them lot of comfort zone, and as soon as the stress is relieved, they start lactating very well. And the second thing which is catching up, we are yet to start in a big way, is a family-centered care. Uma, you can go back by 2 slides. This family-centered care is very, very important in the sense the entire family has a role in the neonatal care. Even if the baby is on oxygen, even if the baby is not ready to feed, the mother, the baby, they are all cared of in the same room. The parents can visit. And it is a total coalition between the doctor and the family. It's not that, oh, I won't take blood when the father is around. No, let the father stand. We'll do the blood. Oh, the babies become sick. Please send the attendants. Oh, let them be there. Let them watch. Let them know the baby is going through difficult time. Once their baby is stabilized, they will know. So this type of a family-centered care has helped in a very big way in involving the entire family in the baby care. Everybody has got some responsibility to take care of the baby. So with this, we are able to give a very good breastfeeding experience for the mother. And one more thing, from Samraksha, a mother delivered triplets, 3 boys who were 30 weeks, all of them on 800, 900, 1.1. And this mother gave exclusive breast milk for all the 3 boys for 6 months, just because we were slowly pushing them, taking them. And at the end of 6 months, she said, doctor, please give me some relief. I've done what you've told. And the babies are now 1 kilo. They are doing excellently well. So just because it's a twins or triplets doesn't mean you can give exclusive breast milk. And what I did is all 450 premature babies who were discharged, they were all below 8 months or 32 weeks. I just looked up at their hospital admissions for flu, for respiratory, diarrhea. Those babies who took exclusive mom's milk, mom's means that mother's milk, did not have any admission in the first year of life. Imagine preterm baby not having any admission in the first year of life when they were given only breast milk through the first 6. So it is economically good for the family also. And one more thing I would like to say is I found only 15% of exclusive breastfeeding in this group at 6 months. I understand we cannot threaten or push breastfeeding among mothers. We have to handhold them, sit with them, find out what is the problem, whether this problem may be solved, may not be solved. But still, even partial breastfeeding is good enough. The best is 100%, 80% is good enough, 60% is good, 40% is good enough, So please do not stop. Whatever you have, you keep giving. More than that, if something is needed that is medically indicated, yes, go ahead. But please do not stop thinking that you have started alternate feed. Alternate feed need not be all the time. Sometimes we do not want to starve the baby. We do not want to put an extra dip on the baby. So sometimes we resort to 1 or 2 formula feeds to make sure they are digesting and then shift to the mother. So most of them carry with that idea. No, they already started in the NICU. Maybe we have to continue. No, that is only to avoid and drips and other invasive procedure. So points to take is it's all in your mind. Once your mind is open, your breast milk is also open. Sometimes when a mother called, doctor, I'm not producing a drop of milk. What should I do? I said, did you have an argument or fight? She said, yes. So please don't lock your mind. Keep your open mind, and your breast milk is also open, and try to give once formula feed doesn't mean formula feed all the time. It is only for that period of crisis. Get out of it at the earliest whenever you're confident. Most of you will be visiting your doctor, checking your weight, and we will always know that there is enough milk or not. So don't bother about it. And try to give it continuously for 6 months. How muchever you have, you continue to give it. And that has got a long way. I told you the results we have seen in our own population. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi. I think that was a very detailed but important aspect of the importance of breastfeeding in preterm and small babies, and how it actually definitely helps improve their immunity. Moving on, I'd like to invite Shruti. Shruti is somebody who is extremely passionate, not just about breastfeeding. She's passionate about the environment and sustainability, and therefore we have requested her to talk to us about breastfeeding from the angle of sustainability. And there are other experiences that she has, which we will hope to tap on when we have the Q&A shortly. Shruti?
Thank you, Dr. Uma. I still call myself a new mother, even though my daughter is now 1 year old. I breastfed her exclusively for 6 months, and I'm still feeding her. So my experiences is I've been learning on the go, being like most mothers. I've read a lot before she was born, as she was born. And of course, finally, only when you experience the whole thing, a lot of things gets ingrained in you, and you, for which I would like to share some of my experiences. And since I have a special interest in sustainability, I wanted to highlight that. And not just sustainability, when you're a new mother, the minute you're pregnant, the internet somehow knows that you're a new mom and starts bombarding you with hundreds of ads of things that actually at the end of it, you realize it's not really necessary. But when you're not yet delivered with your first baby, you're always kind of confused. Okay, what should I take to the hospital? Even though there are a lot of books and advices you get, you still see probably a friend putting up a really nice photo from the hospital breastfeeding with something fancy, or pillow or something like that. You're always very confused about what is actually necessary to take. So as it is, having a baby is puts pressure on your purse. So here are some things where you can save on money, but at the same time save the planet. So the first point is the very fact that you've decided to breastfeed. That itself is a very sustainable option. As Dr. Lakshmi said, you're saving on money as well, because you're the direct source of food for the child. As Mrs. Rekha said, nothing can be as organic as that. So you're not putting pressure on the planet in terms of providing extra food for your child. And of course, there are no waste plastic packages or tins. So for the first 6 months, you are providing the child the best food and not putting pressure on the planet. And if you're feeding directly, there's the other advantage of you don't have to warm the milk. You're giving it, so there are no needs of warming, cooling, sterilizing. In that sense, the carbon footprint is also very less. The next one is a picture like this. This is quite common for most new mothers or to-be moms. These are pictures that keep popping up on your social media feeds or other ads. Do you really need a feeding cover? Do you really need those nursing clothes? From my experience, I didn't have any of these. Baby swaddle is probably the most creative thing that you can use in many ways. One, of course, is to cover yourself if you're feeling conscious while feeding. The best other option is it's a t-shirt, better still your husband's t-shirt. They are baggy enough so it's easy to lift and feed the child. As Indians, the saris are the best way to, have your privacy and still feed. And of course, there is this new two-shirt method, which is quite popular, where you layer up with two t-shirts or one, so you still have a little bit of privacy while feeding the child. So you don't really need to invest in these clothes or other feeding things. In fact, I hardly had nursing clothes. I just took 4 old saris made into nice shift dresses with front buttons. So even even if I stop feeding, I can still walk around with those and nobody's going to know those are nursing clothes. The next, of course, are breast pads. Of course, the first few weeks, you're still figuring out how much milk you're producing, how much milk the child wants. Your breast feels heavy. There are times, as Janani said, some other baby might cry, but you might start leaking, and in public that might be an embarrassing situation. For me, in fact, my first night outside the hospital was at my in-laws, and the next morning I woke up, the full bed was stained with my milk. I didn't realize that, I could produce so much milk, but these are experiences you realize only after you become a mother. So you do sometimes need those breast pads. Opt for a washable breast pad, cotton, those are the best, which is close to your body. Disposable, why do you have to create that amount of junk in the environment? When you're providing the best for your child, you want to provide the best planet as well. So cotton reusable pads are very good. You can even fold old cloth and keep it inside your breast, your bra. Or if you're good with do it yourself, or your mother-in-law is good at it, make these pads out of old cotton cloth. And the best part about these reusable cloth pads is once you've stopped using it, because the first 2-3 months after that, you don't really need it. They make great makeup removing pads. So you do have a purpose for it even now. Then, of course, borrow, share, buy, pre-love. This, I would say, in general, for anything as a new mom for your child, because as the child grows, you realize most things are required just for a few weeks, or probably even few days. There are clothes that my daughter's worn just once and then she's outgrown it. Similarly, something like a breast pump. Most of you, if you're a working mom, or you do need a breast pump for some reason, or other things like a sterilizer, or I never used a milk warmer, but some might need it. So I would say borrow, share, pre-love. There are many amazing sites and Insta handles now that sell sometimes even unopened old products, but in good conditions. I used a 12-year-old breast pump from my sister, and you won't believe they work so well. I mean, these products sometimes work for a lifetime. And the best part is you will have access to these accessories and parts online as well. So in case you don't have a filament or a pipe, you can easily pick it up online. So I would say that some of the Insta handles are Twice Treasured, and few other Insta handles that I suggest you can follow, which are exclusively for baby and mother related products. Then pumping and you're a busy working mother, you would need to store your milk. And for some reason, people just push the plastic disposable milk storage bags. They call it sterile, so this is the best way. But again, I say, you use it once and you throw it. And even after your baby is born, that plastic is still going to be around. So some options that you could have is like Philips Avent provides these reusable storage cups. I'm sure you can sterilize them and store your milk in that. And I'm sure you can later use it to store other things besides milk once its purpose is over. I did come across these silicone milk storage bags, which are easily reusable. Again, you'll have to sterilize and use them, but I've not tried them. What I did was to store them in the pumping bottles. This is definitely not my fridge. It's never this clean. But because I didn't have to pump for many weeks, I was only occasionally stepping out. So just 2-3 bottles I used to pump and keep it in the freezer or fridge as backup. So that's some of the things that I would like to say with regards to sustainability and breastfeeding. But as Dr. Uma said, there's a whole lot that we can go on and on about the whole journey of breastfeeding. As Janani said, if you have the right support system, I was blessed to have this team supporting me through my journey. Even though the first few weeks I had initial hiccups, now, as I said, it's 1 year and I'm still feeding my baby. So nothing like having the best support system, and I can tell you more about it if you want. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Shruti. I'm sure there'll be some interest and questions in the end. We've had a whole lot of talks and short snippets on what it takes to have the community that would support you and the breastfeeding journey. I now would like to invite Gayatri Sandeep to tell us about what it takes to actually have an environment created within a hospital that would make it breastfeeding friendly and motivate the team to stay committed to breastfeeding. Gayatri is the person responsible and the CEO of Sitapati, and a lot of the good work that happens behind the scenes is her work. And Gayatri, I request you to take it from here.
Thank you, Dr. Uma. Good evening, all of you, and it's such a pleasure to meet all of you here right now. And from the level of awareness that you can see from both Shruti as well as Janani's presentations, and from the entire team's presentations, I'm sure you will understand the expertise that will be required in today's era to support and to help people deliver and get into a breastfeeding process. So it's definitely not an easy process, because one added advantage that I would state I'm having here right now is that I'm not only part of this team, but I've also been a beneficiary of the excellent delivery process. My sister-in-law, Dr. Uma, has delivered me twice, and every time it's been a great experience. And the reason why, or the how this happens, how the process of how we induct people into breastfeeding and so smoothly it happens is an experience. And it has come out of a lot of hard work from the team. And to begin with, I'm going to keep it very, very short, as most of the presentations were very scientific and useful. And whatever I'm going to say is only the staff perspective and how we connect it to the patient perspective. So that's my very few points that I'd like to add here. And the good work always speaks, as you know. The stable team in place is very difficult to set up, and once it's set up in place and it is prioritizing on patient experience, that itself is a big success. So in order to enable that, we follow what is called as the WHO guideline and UNICEF prescribed process of making the hospital a baby-friendly initiative. Baby-friendly hospital initiative is the name that's been prescribed for. And we have 10 steps involved in this. As to very quickly, I'd like to enumerate the 10 steps where, first of all, we should have a well-written infant feeding policy. So we have to make sure that every system is part of the protocol, and that has to be adhered to. And it will comply with the international code of restricting the other milk substitutes. And anytime even a bottle of lactogen is being bought in the pharmacy, it has to be informed to the team that somebody has bought it without a prescription. And without a prescription, you cannot buy a formula feed, and it has to be prescribed. So that itself is an international code requirement, and we follow that. Step 2, since it's a stepwise process, the next we follow the step 2 as to ensuring the staff have enough knowledge, competence, and skill to support the breastfeeding process. Especially, we have to gauge the understanding or the awareness of the people coming here to deliver. So that is, it takes time for the staff to analyze that and also take them to the next level. So this would be the next level, giving them, imparting them the knowledge and training. The step 3 would be to discuss with the mother and the family of the mother about the importance of breastfeeding, because it's not just one person's work here, because the family has to be supportive, as everybody, Dr. Lakshmi also enumerated so many reasons why it has to be that way. Number 4 is that the step 4 is facilitating the golden hour. That also has been discussed very well here. And I would add to it that there should be uninterrupted skin-to-skin contact between the mother and the child at every time. And we try to increase the rooming between the mother and the child. How many hours of the child and the mother staying together in the room? That has to be increased periodically, and it always has to be very good, so that the bonding happens automatically and very quickly. I remember very well, I'm one of those mothers who came from an era where I thought after delivery, I would start breastfeeding, and 4 days after delivery, I could go to the mall and shop. But unfortunately, that's not the case. And we have a lot of sacrifices in terms of from sleep to food habits to eating and sleeping after the child does, and making sure that everybody is comfortable happens with a lot of practice and mental preparation. So that is also ensured from the staff level. The step 5 would be to help mothers to troubleshoot their issues, their difficulties, and to ward off all the inhibitions in talking about their initial difficulties in feeding. So the nurse should be able to converse with them and catch these or pick them up very early. Then, of course, step 6 will be to watch over the avoidance of feeding other foodstuffs like sugar, water, etc., that are not actually the breastfeeding guidelines, as per the guidelines. And of course, step 7 would be enable bonding between the mom and child within the room, and 24-hour support given for breastfeeding by the staff in the hospital during the hospitalization. And that is the first step towards making the mother comfortable. And of course, the last 2 would be enable the mothers to pick up cues from the infant on feeding patterns. And this happens when the mother is allowed to enjoy the child with positivity. So the staff are made to talk positive things, encourage them, treat them with empathy, so that they understand it is important to bond with the kid in the initial stages to help the feeding process. Then, of course, the step 9 and 10 explain the risks involved in using pacifiers and feeding bottles that have to be imparted to the mothers here, because there is a lot of pressure from family when they are not able to manage a crying child. Immediately they would say, why don't you take up formula feed? Enough, I think enough is enough, you have tried enough. So, but this is very easily said, but the mother has to first of all feel that she is capable of feeding continuously, and it is within her hands, and to try and not to give up. So that has to be done, and with a lot of emphasis on telling them about the risks involved in the feeding bottles and pacifiers. We try to take to or promote breastfeeding. And of course, the last step, number 10, is to provide exclusive discharge instructions which are customized for the mother as to how to take the patient, take the care forward after the hospitalization is over. And also to follow up with them after every visit. Whenever they come with the baby, the nurses come down from the ward and talk to them and say, how are you? How is the feeding process going on? So which is also a very beautiful routine that has been set. These are all the patient or the mother perspectives. Apart from this, there are a lot of challenges, of course, for the staff. They are of a varied age group. They are very young girls. They are not mothers yet. So without any embarrassment, they should be taught to talk about these things to the mothers who have just delivered. And also they should have this freedom to tell the attenders who are in the room. Say, for example, if there is a father, a father-in-law, and so many other people, and the feeding has to start, and we are taking the baby and giving it to the mother. and the mother would feel a little, uncomfortable. At that time, it's in the hands of the nurse to tell them that the child needs the privacy with the mother at this minute. And I have seen in cases where they have said, it's all right, you can still continue to feed. That is a very interesting culture. At the same time, we have to make sure that the patient is also comfortable, or the mother should be comfortable, and also the family should be kept in a very sensitive manner. I think all these images that are being projected are ways of motivating our staff to keep them going. Anything that is done more than 10 times will bring in monotony. These girls or these young nurses are doing this for a very, very long time with the same enthusiasm and motivation, because we are giving them more opportunities to learn and to improvise, innovate, and to create more interesting workflow. So we create Galactoga competitions where how do you prepare foods? So they prepared recipes and gave it to everybody, and made sure that there is a good rapport happening between the mothers as well as the hospital staff. So overall, I think to conclude, I would say this is entirely a teamwork, and having a wonderful team in place is the foundation for a successful experience for the mothers. And that happens because the training happens very regularly, and everybody is happy to innovate in their work. The pride of work is there with every staff in the hospital. So I think the best asset a parent could give in the childhood of their own children begins with breastfeeding. That's actually taken for granted. You shouldn't take it for granted. It's one of the greatest assets, and therefore that has to be continued with a lot of enthusiasm. And I think I thank for this opportunity, and we would like to listen to more questions and your feedback on the sessions. Thank you, Dr. Uma.
But that comes, I think, because there's so much information that needs to be conveyed about breastfeeding. So we've answered some of the questions live, but I'll take some of the questions. I think most of them are for, we can start off with asking the pediatricians this. My 2-month-old is gassy and doesn't poop every day. Is that because of what I eat? Can I eat anything? Does what I eat make my baby gassy? So either Sharda or Lakshmi, one of you can please take that question.
So answer to that is no. What you eat is not going to pass directly through the breast milk and cause gassiness to the baby. So there may be several other reasons which have to be explored. So it has nothing to do with your diet. You have to eat a healthy diet with lots of vegetables and fruits. Don't eat for 2 people. Eat a healthy diet for yourself, and that's it.
Okay, so the next question is, I was told by my OBGYN after my C-section that there wouldn't be any milk secretion for 1 or 2 days after a C-section, and resorted to formula, and latching was difficult after two days. Is there a medical reason behind what the OBGYN said? Generally, whether you've had a cesarean section or a normal delivery, there isn't any difference in the way lactation sets in. And you should be able to we should be able to put the baby to the breast. The only logical restrictions happen when, let's say there's been a general anesthetic, then we have to wait till the mother's awake. But if it's a spinal anesthetic, as soon as we are able to put the baby to the breast, we can. But sometimes if it has been a complicated section, if there has been a lot of bleeding, say, or very high blood pressure, in those kind of clinical situations, it may take a little bit longer for lactation to be established sufficiently. But that is true whether it's a normal delivery or a section. And so there isn't anything to say if it's a section, lactation will not be established for a couple of days. Rekha, you may want to take this. When the baby feeds for more than 20 to 15 minutes, how do you know that the baby is full?
I can see Dr. Lakshmi smiling there, because this is the most toughest question to answer. But the different schools of thinking, one says go by demand, the other says just have a time schedule and stop it. But that's what we say. At one point of time, it's the mother and the baby who decide, whether to go on or to stop at that point of time. But having said that, let's also remember babies love the breast. They can be on the breast 24/7. I've had mothers who said, throughout the night I was feeding the baby, and then the next day morning she says, I don't know why my nipples are hurting. I said, the nipples will hurt. I'm just surprised that it's not bleeding. So the point here is, it's like every 2 hours. So initially we say go by the baby, not by the clock. So what we mean by that is, whenever the baby cries, whenever the baby is restless, or the baby gives you hunger cues. Now, how do I know what hunger cues are? Very simple. The baby starts searching, or the baby starts licking the back of the hand, or the baby puts the tongue to the corner of the mouth. All these are simple hunger cues. So put the baby on the breast. So two things happen. One, the babies master the art of latching, and the other, the brain reads that so much more signal for the milk to be produced. But having said this, on the day of the discharge, we also tell the mother, don't just don't just go by the baby because you're going to come back and kill all of us. Because as I said, babies love the breast. So at one point of time, you decide that I will go by the clock and not by the baby. So that gives, out of our experience, we found that it gives more sanity to the mother. She's more at peace, and she enjoys the process of breastfeeding because she knows that there is some time for herself, and that her life, it's not just, it's not out of her hand. There's something, she's in hold of what is happening. So this is when we say every 2 hours feed the baby. Maximum gap you give is 3 hours. But the most important thing is, on an average in 24 hours, you breastfeed the baby 8 to 10 times. That's very important. Now, the point here is you have to feed the baby at least for 30 minutes is because of the fore-milk, hind milk. But the point here is it's a very debatable one. So the thing here is, so the babies will lose the latch at one point of time. And then you try to put the baby back on the breast. He refuses. It means the baby's tummy is full. The last point here is there are times the babies will feed only for 5 minutes. And the baby takes the mouth off. You force the baby back. He's not going to take it. But he's going to come back to the breast within the next 20 minutes. So the simplest way to deal with this is just tell yourself the baby was thirsty at that point of time. The baby is hungry at this point of time. So this is how you fix that thing in your mind, and then go ahead.
One cue I'd like to add from my personal experience is after a few weeks, you actually learn to differentiate the various cries of the baby. And my daughter had a distinct inga kind of crying, where all of us at home knew she was hungry, and it was very distinct only when she was hungry. I think once you start bonding and spending time with your child, you will understand the different kind of cries for what she's crying for.
Yeah. And there's one other question, maybe, I think we've lost Janani. Maybe Shruti, you can take it. Once the baby starts teething, does it hurt when the baby suckles?
See, of course, it's going to feel different for sure. My daughter now has 3 teeth, one big one on top and 2 below. But it doesn't hurt right now. The first time when the teeth starts to appear, or you can start feeling it, yes, it feels a little odd, but it's not like the child is going to keep nibbling while suckling. Suckling is different from nibbling. I think once the baby is done with the milk, when she wants to play around, then she might start to probably nibble around. Then you can actually start talking to your baby and say you shouldn't do it. And surprisingly, the baby does understand. So it will feel different, obviously, but it's not going to hurt because baby is actually sucking and not nibbling.
Okay. There's one question that at 6 months, the baby's now started on solids, but the mother's facing joint pains, wrist pains, fingers, knuckles. Pain is so severe that you can't lift your hands. Certainly then means you need to check whether there are 2 possibilities. Even if you're taking calcium supplements, is there vitamin D depletion? Do you need any supplement? And sometimes there can be postpartum arthritis or inflammation. So if you're having very severe joint pains, that needs to be checked out. These 2 are for the pediatricians. Babies poop normally for the first 2 weeks, after which he didn't poop for 7 long days, and then he pooped again. So basically, how normal is it, and how long do you wait? Because we tell them 2-3 days the baby may go without passing motion or pooping. So is 7 days acceptable? Lakshmi, do you want to take that?
Baby pooping has got a wide range of pattern, no? Sometimes they don't do for 3 to 4 days or 5 days and then they poop. But a breastfeeding stool, when they get into first few days, we always allow all this, Once meconium is passed, they may not poop for a long while. But a breastfeeding stool, a baby is typically settled very well on a good breastfeeding schedule. They do their stool after every feed, and it may be very watery in the first week, and it may be 10 to 20 times a day also. But if they don't do it for 5 days or 7 days, it can be normal. You just check the weight of the baby, check the urine output, whether the baby is receiving adequate amount of milk. If that is also taken care of, you can check the thyroid status of the baby if it is consistently not doing for a week or 5 days. So these are the 3 things you have to keep it in mind.
Okay. So there are a couple of questions, thanks Lakshmi, couple of questions about after 6 months, when the baby is moving on to solids, how many times should you breastfeed the baby, 1, and 2, what will happen to the sleep pattern when they are about 6 months, when they still need night feeds? So I'd like 2 opinions here, maybe one from Janani and one from either Rekha or Sharda on, what do you do when when the baby starts on solids? Janani, do you want to go first?
Sure. In my experience, I was told that breast milk is still the primary source of nutrition for the first 1 year of birth. And what I did was to introduce supplements. Supplements were mainly, not supplements, food, solid food was mainly for textural experience. So what I did was to introduce slowly steamed vegetables and rice and steamed food without salt or sugar, and let the baby explore each texture. And so it was not meant primarily for nutrition, but I was still nursing the baby about 3 to 4 times in a day. So this worked very well, and night nursing was irrespective of how the daytime routine was. So that didn't change for me, for both my children. That progressed, I think, beyond 1.5 years is when I could see a difference in the frequency of the night feeds. But beyond that, this is what worked for me.
Okay. Sharda, do you want to say anything?
So exactly like Janani said, we do say weaning food plus breast milk is the way to go for the first 1 year of life. And cow's milk and any other complementary feeding is only after 1 year. So we cannot measure breastfeeding, obviously. So we do not know the amount that's coming, though it's recommended that the baby has about 600 ml of milk per day. And that can, so time and again, the mother can express if she wants and, see if she's getting enough milk, because the only thing that you miss out is calcium. Everything else, I think, with your complementary food, your vitamins and minerals and micronutrients, all of that are met with, because we are giving the complementary food. So milk is not, it's just complementary. It becomes complementary after 6 months of age.
There's another question about, is it okay to breastfeed when the baby has some jaundice, 11 days old, and jaundice? Can we feed?
Yeah, baby has to be fed more often when the baby has jaundice. The first foremost treatment for neonatal jaundice is more frequent breastfeeding. The more the frequent breastfeeding, the more the baby poops, more the transitional stools and the conjugated jaundice gets excreted and the baby comes out of it. So a very good enterohepatic circulation is what we say. The baby should consume milk, it goes to the intestine, gets digested, and it should pass out. That's an excellent route for the jaundice to come down. So for jaundice, more often you breastfeed.
I like to tell the audience that my baby had jaundice as soon as she was born, thanks to Dr. Uma and Sharda.
We didn't give the jaundice, Shruti.
Thanks to them, I was supported. And
yeah, fair, and I'm just kidding. Yeah.
So, my babies had jaundice too. It was not associated with Sitapati Hospital anyway. It was elsewhere, but they also had jaundice. I think.
But as Dr. Lakshmi said, the stool was yellow. We were doing cloth diapering, so you can sometimes see the stain. But it was a good way. The more yellow we saw the stool, we were actually feeling more relieved that the jaundice was going out very soon.
Also, I was told that my blood group was A group, O group, and my son's was A group. And so the chances of having physiological jaundice was probably higher. Could any of the doctors please clarify?
There are two groups of babies that we are aware about. One is the RH incompatibility, and the other one is the ABO incompatibility. What that means, the mother has O group and the baby can be either A or B. Then in these situations, the babies can have, we are more watchful. We are more watchful for the rising bilirubin. So we watch the babies more intently, and even in the first 48 hours, their bilirubins can go above the standard, and they need more help. So these are two warning situations.
Okay. There are a couple of 2-3 questions to do with the baby coughing out milk at the end of a feed, or the baby spewing some milk when the baby is burped. And is this normal? And is there, should we worry at any point? And one mother says the baby has been coughing once or twice in the last 2 days, and given the pandemic, I'm worried. So I think the coughing may not have anything to do with the spewing of milk, but the question is, all babies do bring out a little bit of milk when they burp, and that's normal. But anything specific that Rekha or any one of you want to add?
One of the main things that we do tell a new mother on discharge is ensure that after every feed, irrespective of the time, the number of minutes the baby's been on the breast, put the baby in the burp position. Now, if you're going to wait for a burp, it's an eternal wait. The next feeding time is going to come anytime, okay? So it's not that the babies have a full tummy, so they're going to burp. No, it's not that. With due respect to the little ones, babies are like cows. They love to retain some milk in their mouth. So that's one of the main reasons why we don't encourage mothers lying down and feeding. Because one, breast milk is because lactation is very sedative. The mother can sleep, the baby can sleep with the milk in the mouth. So the thing here is you have to put the baby in the burp position and cup your hands and tap the baby's back or stroke the baby's back at least for a good 8 to 10 minutes. If the baby burps, you're lucky, but the point here is the baby will spit out some milk and then you leave the baby down. So that's the most important thing that you have to do.
Here
I'd like to add that what Rekha was describing is called posseting, which is acceptable. But there is a phenomena called reflux situation. Sometimes the babies have a little bit of reflux in the newborn period, and then they can choke and cough. So you need to distinguish that from a regular posseting, regurgitation, etc.
Yeah, one point to add is whenever milk comes through the nose, that means there is definitely a problem. They have to meet a doctor and see them.
Okay. So there are a couple of questions. We're getting close to wrap up time. We've stretched ourselves. Couple of questions to do with latching, which I'll come to. But there's one very important question, I think, because this mother is asking, how do you stay emotionally stable if the baby's taking time to latch? I think it's extremely important because there are babies who, there are some babies and some mothers for whom it's like a natural, it's a breeze. And there are some who struggle, and there are some where the baby just refuses to latch. Sometimes it's to do with the posture, sometimes it's to do with the hold of the baby. Rekha, do you quickly want to talk about how to improve the latch and the thing? And I think emotional stability comes basically by knowing that it can happen, it's not your fault, and that you have to be positive. It's like any other problem. You have a problem, you try and break it down and say, why is this happening? Who can help me sort it? And what can I do to help get it sorted? Rekha?
I'm just going to add to what Dr. Uma said. And remember, crying is the only language the baby knows. Doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that's the only language the baby knows. And going back to latch, I did see a question where the soreness of the nipple, that's question was also there. So we're just going to club all that. Care of the nipple is very important right from the antenatal period itself. So we do advise mothers who are probably in the right after they cross the 34th, 35th week when they come in for their classes. I do tell them, so right from the 34th week onwards, do not apply soap on your nipples. There are a lot of these over-enthusiastic mothers who feel that they should keep their breast and nipple clean. And I've had one, one mother who used to, use a toothbrush to clean the nipple. So please understand that the nipples are as sensitive as the baby, and also understand the sebaceous glands on the areola, which will release some kind of a, in layman's term, like an oily thing, which will keep the nipple and the areola moist. But the best way to take care of the nipple is after you deliver, religiously before every feed, we teach this anyways, massage your breast nicely, express the foremilk, apply it on the nipple and the areola. Just for your information, the foremilk is an excellent moisturizer. And after you finish feeding, again, take time off, massage your breast, take the milk out, apply it on the nipple and the areola. Hind milk is known to be a good antiseptic. Leave the breast open under the fan at least for 5 minutes, air dry your nipples, and you can keep some ice packs or you can use a hydrogel pad and then wear it. Now, these are all it's all on the periphery. The most important thing is latch. So as we said in the presentation, get your latch right. If there is an issue and there is a pain, even on a scale of 0 to 10, it's 1 or 2, please feel free to get in touch with us. It's just a small, slight angle change, but that will just help you be painless throughout it.
And there's one last question. The last question that we'll take is it good to give both breast milk and formula milk? And I think we have all reiterated that it is ideal to give exclusive breast milk, but and we should all strive to give exclusive breast milk as much as possible. Having said that, there are situations where despite the best effort, the breast milk may not be sufficient for that mom's breast milk may not be sufficient for that baby. There are mothers where for medical reasons, maybe because of the medication that they're taking, maybe because of the complications that have happened around delivery, they may not be able to breastfeed. Sometimes when the baby has problems, we may medically advise formula, as both Dr. Sharda and Lakshmi said, for a short period of time, after which the breastfeeding may be able to supplement exclusively. So if it is indicated and necessary for the baby, it's not like formula cannot be used, but we should understand why we are supplementing formula, for what reason. If we are able to then get tied over that period and then go back to exclusive feeding, that would be ideal. But if it is not possible and you do need to give formula, please don't kill yourself with guilt because you have needed to do that. It doesn't make you any less of a mother if you need to give formula. What is important is that we try and we understand, and when there is a need, it's perfectly okay. There are the one thing as an obstetrician that I have noticed when people come back and say they're on formula, they don't put the baby to the breast and they give formula. Now it's a feedback. It's a beautiful feedback. So if you let the baby suckle more breast milk will be produced. If you reduce the number of times the baby is suckling at the breast, then something in the brain tells your body, actually, you don't need to be producing that much milk, so milk will reduce even more. So even if you have to give formula because the milk is not sufficient, always let the baby suckle at the breast and then give the formula, because the most important, strongest stimulus for milk is the suckling impact. So that should not be stopped. Yeah?
Just 2 quick messages. I just want to do 2 quick things. Like how when the baby is with the mother, frequent sucking will prevent the breast engorgement. When the baby is in the NICU, frequent expression. Many a times mother, they get the fear to come to NICU because we'll ask them milk. So they think they don't have milk. So they avoid coming to the NICU for the fear of that. But let them, if there is milk or not, let them keep expressing cyclically. So that if not today, tomorrow it will be produced, day after tomorrow it will be produced. And for all lactating mother, milk is very precious, in great demand. They can donate excess milk if they have. I want to make
there are breast milk banks.
Milk banks are there, NICUs are there, where some of the babies, we cannot give formula feed for preterm. We have to give only mother's milk. So sometimes we tend to keep them on a longer time on fluids and parenteral nutrition. So please appeal to the mother is, if you have excess milk, please donate milk for a good cause. Thank you very much.
And on that point, the one, we didn't have time to touch on this, but sometimes when there is excessive milk or when the nipple is cracked, you can have pain. And if there is pain and swelling, it may mean that there is some inflammation or infection. And that is something that also needs to be managed carefully, because otherwise the breast abscess can happen. But even if there is mastitis or breast abscess, you can still feed while that is being handled. Now, from a mother's perspective, whether quickly Shruti wants to say a couple of sentences about that, then we'll wrap it up.
Yes, so as I said, we've all read about pregnancy and breastfeeding, and all of you have advised about there could be chances of engorgement and mastitis. You still sometimes when it happens to you, you think, when you come across this information, you think, oh, this is not going to happen to me. And for me, my baby had latched on to me quite well. And so we just took it for granted that she was feeding quite well. But it looks like the left breast, she was not latching on well, which resulted in sore nipples and eventually engorged breast and eventually mastitis. Again, for me, there was at some point I couldn't differentiate which was just excess milk engorgement or there was an infection happening. But then later I was told if you're having like blue scars on your breast, that means there is a little infection. It was a quite painful process for me. There was a lot of pain involved. Sometimes I couldn't feed because of the sore nipples directly, so I had to express that side and feed her. So as most of you was advising us, don't go through this guilt or this pain, I did go through a lot of such varied emotions, which could actually sometimes put off people in saying, I don't want to breastfeed and that's it. But I had made up my mind, I am going to breastfeed. And as I said, I had this support system helping me through this process. And as I said, now it's still 1 year. I am still feeding my child. So, you know, it's like labor pain. You sometimes forget about and you might land up having a second or a third child. It's the same thing. Now I can't remember that pain that I went through mastitis, but I do know I went through that because the joys of breastfeeding is much better, because now she's almost 1 and I'm worried, okay, when is she going to stop feeding? I won't have this bonding time with my baby. And the one other thing that I wanted to say, when do you know your child needs milk? I had tried sign languages with my baby at about 4-5 months and it worked very well. So this sign, I taught her to say milk. And so when she was crying, when I used to ask milk, she would say milk and it worked perfectly. And this symbol I taught her for saying more. So if she wanted more milk, she would say like this.
So cute.
And it works pretty fine even when she started solids. So you could try that. And I had no stress about when she wanted her milk and when she didn't. So even now, if she wants something, she says this for her milk.
Okay. On that note, I think we should call it a wrap. And yes, Janil.
I just request the doctors to say a few words for mothers who are COVID positive and want to breastfeed.
Okay. Yes, I think that's very important. So COVID positive mothers can breastfeed. There is no reason to say that they cannot. And but there are certain precautions that need to be taken. Most women who are COVID positive, who we are taking care of, are what we call asymptomatic mothers. They are positive, but they are not sick and in the hospital admitted. And therefore, as long as they take precautions and they wear a mask, they use hand hygiene, they can breastfeed. The only other thing is, of course, that we do recommend that the babies are swabbed as a matter of routine if the mother is positive, but I don't think there's any contraindication. Anything more, Lakshmi or Sharda?
You can breastfeed directly as long as the mother has taken the precaution. If the mother is sick and she cannot come close to the baby, she can always express the milk and send it across.
Right.
So
any last points, Gayatri?
Positive mother and baby.
Yeah, I think as I always said, this is an ancient topic that's always taken for granted. Today, this has taken a new dimension because of the awareness that's available. And people really want to breastfeed and give that benefit to the child. So I think that's a welcome change in the last few decades. And I think we as a team of healthcare providers should always facilitate this process in the best interest of the mothers, and with a lot of enthusiasm, saying that they can do it and they will do it. So that should be the motto in emphasizing this. I think it will be a great success, and it will bring in a lot of goodwill to the healthcare system when doctors and all healthcare workers promote breastfeeding on a regular basis.
Any last words, Rekha, Sharda? And then we'll wrap up.
The norms of breastfeeding are not set in stone. So I think it differs
Yes,
from one
I
mother
think
to
that's
the
very
other.
important.
Yeah.
Each one's journey can be different, but the purpose is to ensure that you're supported and the baby gets the breast milk.
Yes, that's all it is. And the most important thing is enjoy motherhood. I think that's more important than anything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that helps.
Okay. Thank you very much. And thank you all for those who stayed in, even though we've actually exceeded our time by nearly 45 minutes. Thank you so very much. And thanks to all of you for giving the time. It has been a really interesting and enjoyable panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Bye.
thanks, Dr. Maruma.